right, guys, we are back. It is Saturday morning. You are listening to K-Talk Radio. This is Yoshi Shiraki. I'm your host. You're listening to the show Utah, Home Sweet Home. And today, I have a special guest, Marcus Burton. But before we get into Marcus, let me share with you what we're going to be sharing with you. We're going to be talking about the ins and outs of a real estate transaction from the eyes of a loan officer or mortgage broker. You will, basically a lender. You will want to listen in because without the loan, there's usually no purchase of a home, unless of course you have a large chunk of cash. We will also be discussing the top questions my guest is asked by his clients. And usually if it's the top questions he's asked over and over and over, they're probably pretty good questions, so you're going to want to pay attention so you know what to ask when you're chatting with a loan officer or a mortgage broker. We're also going to discuss a success story on leveraging the bank's money to create your own wealth. So, you always hear OPM, other people's money, leveraging other people's money, in this case the bank's money, to create your own wealth. And we will be hearing about a nightmare story as well as a success story. I already said the success story, but a nightmare story. Those are always fun to hear, not go through. And then we'll also be going through the step-by-steps of obtaining a loan. So if you've never obtained a loan before, Marcus is going to share with us the typical steps so that you have an idea of what to expect when you go through that. And then we're also going to spend some time talking about refinancing and home equity line of credits, when it might make sense, when it might not make sense to do that. So, without further ado, let me tell you a little bit about Marcus. Marcus, first of all, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. You've got a ton of wisdom. I'm excited for the listeners to hear all about it. So, Marcus was born and raised in San Francisco, California. Married his very best friend. They have 3 wonderful daughters. He's been self-employed for over the last 25 years. He's an owner of a private fitness training studio, co-owner of a small national telecommunications company, dabbled in real estate since the early 90s. Mohammed, were you even born in the 90s? Okay, Mohammed's very young here, so just want to make sure. Moved to Pleasant Grove, Utah in 2003, where he decided to branch out in real estate and purchase investment properties, flip homes, and end up becoming a loan officer because of the business that was coming his way. And he's been doing loans ever since 2003 and loves what he does. And that's actually why I brought him in, because after getting to know Marcus, I could see that he loves what he does versus doing it because he needs a living. When you find people passionate about what they do, they seem to just be better at it because they love it. So, Marcus, if I may, I'd love to ask you what the top 3 questions are that you get asked as a mortgage broker, loan officer. What should I call you? Mortgage broker, loan officer? What do you prefer?
I'm a broker. Mortgage broker.
Okay, perfect. So what are the top 3 questions you get asked?
So I would say the biggest question that I get asked all the time from every prospective borrower or client that I talk to is, what are interest rates? Interest rates, I generally quote them between 3 and 9. And I do that on purpose because interest rates are varied. It depends on your loan to value. It depends on if it's an investment property, if it's a second home. It depends on your debt to income. The biggest contributor, it depends on your FICO score. They're FICO driven. So I get asked that questions a lot, and I think it gives me an opportunity to really teach people what interest rates really are to their specific need and not just a general, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. As a real estate agent, my clients ask me that all the time, and usually I refer them to you or whoever they're working with as their lender, just because everybody's scenario is different.
It is different, and a lot of times I'll have people call me and they'll go, hey, what are interest rates today? And I tell them that whatever that interest rate is that day, I like to quote them live interest rates. And they say, well, wait a minute, my buddy just got, maybe it's a half point less. And I said, well, when did he buy? And they'll tell me, well, he bought about 6 months ago. And I says, well, unfortunately, interest rates go up and down. Investors rule that when they're on the market. Bonds go up and down. When bonds are doing great, interest rates go up. When bonds are doing poorly, interest rates go down. And that happens every day on the market. So they're dictated interest rates. Sometimes I've seen them change 3 times in a day. The story of my world, trying to quote people and get them. So I try to educate people as good as I can on what they can expect with interest rates.
Very cool, very cool. What would you say the second question is?
Probably the second question is having to do with credit score. A lot of people out there, it's a misconception that everybody thinks when I ask somebody, when I say, what do you think the waiting period is behind a foreclosure or behind a bankruptcy before you can buy a home? And the standard answer is 7 years. So 7 years is correct. However, the 7 years is the time that it takes to fall off of your credit. Sometimes it takes 10 years. But with an FHA government loan, you can basically go out and within 2 years after the discharge date of the bankruptcy, you can purchase a home. After 3 years of the discharge date on the foreclosure, you can use an FHA loan. And I want to kind of talk about that just a little bit because I have a lot of clients that come and they'll say, and I'll just quote one client that this happened to recently. She went out and she basically said, it's been 3 years since my foreclosure, I want to buy a home. It was actually 4 years. And to me, I said, this is great, it's been 4 years. But I specifically asked her, well, it might have been 4 years since the foreclosure date, but we need to look at title. We need to find out when it actually left the name of the bank, when it was actually sold. So anyway, come to find out, we went in, we looked at it, and the bank held the property, even though it went into foreclosure, they held the property for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
So therefore, she's not 4 years anymore, she's only 2 years. So she has to wait 1 more year to qualify. There's always that sticking point, and a lot of times I will end up, and I was going to talk about this later anyway, but a lot of times I'll end up with people who come back and say, hey, I had a lender who couldn't pre-qualify me and I had a foreclosure. And the first question I ask them is, what was the discharge date? And more importantly, let's do a search and find out when it actually, the title changed to when it was out of their name. And that's when the 3-year period starts with FHA.
Got it. Okay, very interesting. So so basically the bank can hold on to these foreclosures for as long as they want.
They can hold on for as long as they want. And a lot of times what they'll even do, and this is something that, in this industry you learn every day, just like in real estate, right, Yoshi?
Right.
So what I learned recently is there's, even though the bank has sold it, sometimes FHA in particular, they have a report called the Cavers report, and that's just a report on keeping track of that borrower. If they, for instance, even if the discharge date was 3 years ago, maybe they didn't release the mortgage insurance or didn't pay that off until later on. So the 3 years starts after that. So there's steps that you have to go through. This client of mine actually went through the process of calling FHA, talking to FHA, and even though she had about 6 or 8 months to wait before she could actually purchase, she actually made a request to call what suppressed the mortgage insurance. She got it suppressed, she won, and so we're going to be out looking for a home for her this week.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It's awesome. Yeah.
That is good
for
news.
her. I'm happy for her.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well then, now what's the third most common question you're asked?
Great question. Third question is, why do I need a pre-approval?
Yeah.
So I think the industry has it wrong. You're a real estate agent, and I work with tons of real estate agents, but the minute somebody wants to buy a home, let me ask you, who do they go to?
Usually a real estate agent.
Usually a real estate agent. And what does that real estate agent tell them?
You should get pre-qualified.
You should get pre-qualified, right?
Yes.
So I try to educate people on pre-qualification. It's like, when you're pre-qualified, I'm pulling your credit. I am looking at your income documentation, maybe pulling tax records if you're self-employed. I am doing my diligence to make sure that you are a qualified borrower. That makes a huge difference in pre-qualification because that shows the seller that you are an able buyer. It kind of lets you know what area you can buy in. So you're not going to look at a $500,000 home, that's the one your wife wants, then you realize you can only qualify for $350,000, nothing is going to look that good anymore.
Right.
So pre-qualification to me is so important to get done because it just gives you the power to know where you are and what you can do.
Wonderful. Yeah, that makes sense. And as a real estate agent, I would say the more stronger that pre-qualification that is, the more stronger your offer will be when you go to submit the offer to a seller.
Absolutely. It makes all the difference in the world.
Yep. So versus somebody who has no pre-qualification, the seller might like your offer as far as the number you've presented. However, they don't know if you can actually buy the home, so they might not pick your offer.
Correct.
And go with a less stronger offer on someone who's showing I can actually afford your house.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Very cool. Awesome.